Reishis Goyim, and the entire idea about how it had to be by Moshe Rabbeinu. He had to raise up his hands. We had to do something unusual that we don't find by any other of the Muhammad's or the wars that the Yidden had with that the Yidden had with any other of the nations, including the 31 kings and the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael. So to understand that, we need to understand how Amalek is a Reishis Goyim, the beginning of all Goyim. On the one hand, he relates to the Goyim. On the other hand, he is higher than them. He is the first. So to be able to explain that, we start explaining how Kochas HaNefesh, there's the Kochas Pnimim, which is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, the Avodah according to Tam B'das and reasoning. Then there's the Avodah of Chai Yechida, which is higher than Seichel and Midas than the Kochas Pnimim. Chai is the level of Chochmah, the way it's the source and higher than everything. It's the and Yechida, the Yechida Liyachta, completely joined with the Eibishter. And that is not usually used. Those two koiches, Chai and Yechida, where Chachma appreciates that that there's nothing besides the Eibishter, and the Koyach HaMesiras Nefesh, and the complete bond that one becomes completely one with Hashem's Metzias, is not something that is a constant, always on type of avodah. Whereas the koiches Pnimiyim of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, these are avodas that permeate the person and that are constantly the person is doing at work with the avodah shall be top of that. Okay, so in Ois Tes, now he's going to bring it back concerning understanding the difference between, we said, by understanding how it's in the Nefesh Alachiz, Zel Lumazeh, we'll be able to understand the difference between Amalek and the 7 nations. According to this, will also be understood the difference between the war with Amalek and the war with the 7 nations. Where Yisrael, when the Jewish people had to go to a settled land, Eretz Taiva, good and broad land, Shasham, over there, the Avodah is in an organized fashion, in a way that's internalized and permeating. Then the war was with the 7 nations. They are similar to the 7 emotional attributes. That the way they are refined is through a war in an internalized fashion. For this sake, it was sufficient in the war through the avodah by reason and knowledge. In other words, since the 7 nations correspond to the 7 emotional characteristics, emotional attributes, and the way how one deals with it is an internalized, pneumistic type of way. So to be able to handle those midas, to be able to deal with those midas of klippa, intellect is enough. One doesn't have to go beyond seichel and midas, which is seichel. So in other words, he has the level of neshama, which is bina, moichin, like we said, intellect. That's sufficient. You don't have to tap into the emergency stash, the chaya yechida. As opposed to the Muhammad being in the wilderness. It's interesting that he also juxtaposes these two things. Eretz Neshavas means things are settled, they're normal, they're all down with us. Midbar is a wild place. It's a wilderness. It's a desert. It's something out of the norm, out of the regular. And that was where the Muhammad was with Amalek. Muhammad is Amalek. All of them are concerning Amalek. It says Reish is going Amalek. The first of the Goyim is Amalek. Shulbaif and Shal Reish is Vavdollah Bahem. It's in such a way that he is the first. And like we said, by calling him the first, meaning he is removed from them, he is above them. They do have a connection with him because they come and derive from him. That's how we explain that the word Reishis in the beginning of the Maimon, we said it has in it 2 components. On the one hand, it's above. On the other hand, it's called the first, means it's the beginning and has an association with the rest of it. For the sake of dealing with Amalek that is beyond and removed from the Goyim, there is a need for to counteract it with a similar level of Kedusha, not a level that's permeating, but a level that's also in a way that is removed and higher than, just like Amalek is removed and higher than all the guys. We need to tap into a level in Kedusha that's beyond reason, beyond understanding. For that, be able to counter Amalek, we need to have the bittul to godliness of the level of Yechidah, Shechavuka, the Vukabach, Yechidah Liyachta. It's embracing and cleaving in you. It's Yechidah, to be joined with you, to be one with you. That's the level of Yechidah. Or at least, if not the level of Yechidah, you need to have the counter Amalek, at least Chaya, at least you need to have the bittul of Chachma, which is Chaya. Now, we said before, that what is called the bittul of Chachma, Jehu Levadihu ve'ein zalasi, that he is all there is. That is the perception of Chachma, that realize that Hashem is all there is, and there's nothing besides him. That there's no other existence except for the Eibush. So he says, what is the Lamaila Matam Vadas aspect of that? So he says the Kiva Shabit Lamitzias Veran Ois Mitzias. Who hepativoy since the nullification of the Mitzias. To cease being in existence is the opposite of his nature. That's the avoidance beyond reason and knowledge, and that type of avoidance as well can counter a Molech's being beyond reason and knowledge. So he's going to explain in what way a Molech was beyond intellect, beyond reason, beyond understanding. What was illogical about a Molech? Top of page Yudches, page 14. The idea behind this is the Shem Kedusha. Yes, avoid just like in Kedusha, there's the avoid that's beyond reason and knowledge. In this, in opposite and opposition to that, Hashem made also the way Amalek acted was in such a way that doesn't have any room for this according to reason. The going out of Eden from Mitzrayim was in such a manner that it fell upon them. Who is the them? All the nations of the world, a fear and a trembling fear. That was the natural, logical thing when you saw all the miracles that took place with the Eden and the destruction that happened to Egypt. So therefore, it makes sense that there would be no aspect of any reason for someone to stand up and fight. Apple became still an all ineligible and not only did Amalek not become affected by the Yidden's great success when they left Mitzrayim, Ela Adrab, just the opposite. He attacked the Yidden, as we'll soon explain, and he initiated the attack. By the way, just to give you an example of what this means, I remember somebody was recalling the difference between traveling to Hebron right after, I think, the 1967 Six-Day War versus in the 80s or 90s during the times of the Intifada, they had to go in what's called armored buses with protection, with soldiers. Whereas when they went there in 1967, after the war, the Arabs were terrified of them. They saw the open miracles that took place during the Six-Day War. They were terrified of Yidden. So the same way, the world was terrified when they saw such unbelievable miracles taking place when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. Here you had one Meshuggah, you had Amalek, completely illogical, that went and attacked the Yidden. Not only wasn't scared, but he looked. Here's the point that the Rebbe is going to emphasize in this mimer. He looked to attack the Yidden. In other cases where it says a war, it says by Yilachim, and he fought. He went to war. This one went to war with that one. This nation went to war with the Yidden. Whatever it was. Here it says by Yavoy, Molech by Yilachim Yisrael. What's the idea of Yavoy? This means he came on his own. He didn't like encounter a situation where the Yidden might encroach on his borders, etc., etc. He went out of his way to pick a fight with the Yidden. Not in such a way that the Yidden came to fight with Amalek, and he had no choice. The Yidden were there. Even if you're scared of someone, if you're forced into a corner, you might fight. But over here, they were looking for a fight. They came to fight the Yidden. Lashna Yiduam, like the well-known expression, chutzpah b'loy taga, a chutzpah without a crown. What does it mean, a chutzpah without a crown? A king who wears a crown has reason to feel high and mighty. But how about someone that's not wearing a crown? Why do you feel higher than others? That means leloy tam. It's an expression. Chutzpah b'loy taga is an expression like a chutzpah and a gaiva without any reason. And the Rebbe gives examples of this. There is a type of gaiva and an arrogance and pride that is based on reason, even though that itself is incorrect. And then there's a pride which is completely baseless. He says in line 12, if you do on mashal like it's known the metaphor for this. Or the examples of this. There is a chutzpah that's based on reason. The pasuk says that a rich person will proclaim and speak in a very chutzpahdik manner. That's what the Shlomo Melch says in Mishlei. But in his own mind, at least, there's a justification. In his mind, there's a reason for this. Since he believes, he thinks that my power and the strength of my hand made me all this well. Therefore, he prides himself and he praises himself in his riches until he responds in a very chutzpahdik way, or he proclaims and speaks in a chutzpahdik way. Similar to this concerning a wise person with his wisdom, that the pasuk says, but the chacham who takes pride and is prideful with his wisdom has some type of reasoning, at least in their mind, why they should have pride. Though the truth is that by both of them, the rich person and the wise person, even though they have a justification, it's not a true explanation. But Kuntres Mayin, like it's explained at length in Kuntres Mayin of the Rebbe Rashab, that even if someone has gifts of riches, gifts of wisdom, but Shakashi is born when he thinks into it. He will see that Hashem, your God, gives you the capability to acquire the wealth. Both when it's considered, both concerning material, physical wealth, that the reason why he is rich is not his own doing, therefore he has nothing what to be prideful about. Both concerning spiritually wealth. If a person feels spiritually gifted, including also concerning someone that is very smart. So, therefore, in truth, he has nothing what to boast about, he has nothing what to be prideful about. Yet, despite the fact that in truth, it has no leg to stand on, still in all, there is a grasp, there is some type of room by a rational thought process to say, well, I'm so wealthy, I take pride in it. Well, I'm so smart, I take pride in it. That is all by others. That's not what Amalek is about. Amalek, we said, is chutzpah b'loy taga, chutzpah without a crown. No reason to be chutzpah. Line 25, there's also the chutzpah of someone that knows about themselves that they are low. They do not think that they are high and mighty. Like was by Amalek. Where do you see that Amalek thought himself being low? He was descended. Amalek came from a maidservant. The Medrash, Kedisa Medrash gets brought on the Medrash, that it says that the sister of Loiton was Timna, and she was from a very important family, but she very much wanted to have to do with the family of Avram. So she went and became a Pelegish, a concubine to Eliphaz, the son of Esau, just to be able to be connected with Avram's family. And from her came about Amalek. So she became like a maidservant, a concubine. And so Amalek was like a terrible yichus. And despite that, it's not only did Amalek not become affected, top of page test of the fear and the trembling fear that fell upon all the nations of the earth when they heard about what happened with the Yidden Mitzrayim. But just the opposite. By Yahweh Amalek ve'Elochem Yisrael, Amalek came. He started the fight, and he came to battle and war with the Yidden. This is something that's completely illogical. Therefore, the avoid is necessary to overcome Amalek, to deal with him. And is not the avoid that's based on reason. The truth is that there's the idea of Tam Vadas, there's the idea of reason, understanding that Amalek has, but it never helped him. It's not that he's stupid or he's unknowing or he doesn't have enough information, but if you would supply him with the information, you'd be able to deal with it. In other words, like this, we're saying over here that Amalek's attack against the Eden was illogical. Now, there could be two reasons why a person can act in a way that's illogical. One reason why I act illogically is because I'm poor of knowledge. I don't have enough information. So you supply the appropriate information. So then you supply the appropriate information. So you repair the situation. Now the person will hopefully act logically. Then there's a situation where the person has a mind, has intellect, or has the information, and they choose to ignore it and they choose to act illogically. That's not going to help to explain to them anything. It's not going to help to be logical with that person because they're not acting logically, even though they could understand or they maybe even do understand. Where do we know that Amalek also had logic and also could understand? So he says in line 7, Koloshna do like a well-known expression, that he knows his master, and he still intends to rebel against it. It's not that he's not aware. It's not because he doesn't know. He has knowledge. He has awareness, and still he chooses to go against Hashem. I know this means though he knows this is his master, and then the Rebbe adds another twist. Not just some type of knowledge that's like some type of awareness that he learned about or something. But something that Torah calls Yodeya. Yodeya, Das in Chassidus is a powerful thing. We know that Das is a very powerful knowledge. Like it's explained in Tanya, the idea of Das is that his mind is set into it strongly. In Kedusha, you need to do something to have your mind set strongly into something because Ruchni, spirituality, is foreign to us, so we need to meditate a lot and use our power of Das to identify and connect and become totally immersed in the idea of godliness. When it comes to Gashmias, that's our natural state. Our natural state is in a way of Das that we know of the physicality, and it's part of our existence. But Amalek was not poor of Das even when it came to Ruchnis. He was Yedeyas Rebbeinu. He knew in a way of a strong Das, he knew of his master. It says line 12, Afal became, despite having the strong awareness of Hashem, he intends to rebel against the Eibishter. That's the idea of a chutzpah without a crown. Behind this means, though he has no explanation for it, he remains in a an approach and a movement of chutzpah, of arrogance and cheat. Until he doesn't become affected by any revelation of light. This doesn't talk to him, this doesn't affect him. From this, we see also in Avodas Hashem the inner idea of Amalek, that a person is very ambivalent when it comes to the servants of Hashem. This means though he sees many things, that because of those things, he should have been in very great excitement and very impassioned and overwhelmed by the experience. The person that's doing the avodah is an approach of coldness. Asher karcha, that the Chazal say, Asher karchas in the word, the one that met you, karchas, and also in the word kar, that he is cold, that it makes you cold. That's the avodah of Amalek, that even though you understand so much, and because of that you should be so excited, or because you experience so much, you should be so excited about Hashem, and instead you're cold. Therefore, the advice to defeat Amaleki, not through avoid, which is a war that's based on reason and explanation, because there's no talking to him. Is beyond reason and knowledge. Beginning from the avodah, it's a level of chaya, it's a level of chokmah. The idea of bittul b'metzias. So when you start with the idea of chokmah, the idea of chaya, that's beyond reason, it's possible to defeat Amalek. Any question? This is what it says, that when Moshe raised his hand, and that's when the Yidden overpowered. In other words, we needed to have the special input, the special power of Moshe Rabbeinu to be able to defeat this unusual aspect of this unusual type of klippa, which is Amalek, and then he imbued the Yidden with it. That's why it says Moshe raised his hand and Yidden were overpowered. What is the level of Moshe? It's like it says, and we are ma, the level of ma, that's in Sfiras HaChochma. We know the Alter Rebbe says right in the beginning of Tanya, Chochma is a koyach ma. It's a power of what? A power of bit. Va'ad, to such a degree, shegam b'yoyse lamata, to such a degree was Moshe the level of bittul and a manifestation of Chochma, that is, that his vessel, meaning his body, did not in any way interfere and contradict the idea of his nevuah that he received his prophecy. Top of page Chav. Before become like it's explained in many places. The difference between the way Moshe Rabbeinu experienced nevuah and the way other Nevi'im did, during the time of receiving prophecy, Moshe Rabbeinu stood his ground like a normal person talking with someone else. That's how he experienced nevuah with Hashem. Why was that possible? How was that possible? By him and other Nevi'im did not have that type of experience, because his body was completely refined. That's why it was said about Moshe Rabbeinu that when he was born, it says that he was good. It says when he was born, the house, and here he's talking about not a literal house, but the figurative house. What houses the neshama? That's the body. So his body was filled entirely with light, meaning that his body was completely and totally transparent to the neshama and clear channel for the neshama to manifest. To such a degree, that his body was in such a way that the Shekhinah spoke out of Moshe Rabbeinu's throat, because his body was completely a vehicle and a channel for godliness. So therefore, he was able to manifest his powers of Chachma, of Bittul. To know this idea that also the body of Moshe was completely good. It's like the Spheres HaChachma, that in Chachma we said also there's no keli practically. The vessel itself is no level of oil. That's why Chachma is called the level of Chayoy. What we're going to say tomorrow before Mincha, he is one with the life forces, he is one with the bodies. So usually it refers to the level of the Iris is the life force of the spheres, and the bodies are the Kalim of the spheres. Sometimes Chachma is referred to as just Chayoy, not Garmoy. Why? Because is the Kali of Chachma, the body of Chachma is completely on the same level like the light. The Ilu as opposed to where the Kalim begin. If you compare it to the lower levels, so really Kalim don't really begin in Chachma. Kalim begins in Bina, like we spoke about also earlier in the Maimer, that it's the level of Oyer and not Kalim. So since Chachma was since Moshe Rabbeinu was the embodiment of Chachma, so the same thing. His Oyer was primary, the neshama, and the body was completely transparent, like the Kli of Chachma. That's like the Oyer. It's not something that covers, and conceals, etc. So he says in line 11. So now we can understand why Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that was able to defeat Amalek. It's not good because the great quality of the level of Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to contain and receive within him the level of Chaya, and not just the level of Chaya, which is the bittul of Chachma necessary to defeat Amalek. He was also able to receive the level of Yechida. Therefore, Kasher Yom Moshe Yisrael. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu raised up his hands, then the Yidden overpowered. Question is, what does it have to do with the Yidden? With Moshe Rabbeinu's level. Moshe Rabbeinu would be fighting the war, I understand, but it was the Yidden fighting the war. It says, the Kivush of Moshe, Yerayim, since Moshe was the faithful shepherd, Roya Nam and Shachal Yisrael, of all the Jewish people, he had in his capability to affect and influence, Shagam Eitzel Bnei Yisrael, also by the Jewish people, Tisoider B'chinas Moshe Shebachol Echad VeEchad MiYisrael, that should become awakened the Moshe of each and every Yid. So Moshe Rabbeinu shared and transmitted and awakened and inspired within each and every Yid this level of Moshe, the level of the bittul of Chachma, Chaya, and even Yechida. Through this, that all the Yidden became, or those that went to battle, became a level of the Moshe's men. In other words, they embodied Moshe's type of capability of Chachma and Chaya and Yechida, like the expression used in the Maimed Alter Rebbe and Torah. Yisrael, so then the Jewish people could overcome Amalek. Nifala Indian, the Vayachlish Goymer, Amalek was Amal Vicherev. That was affected the idea that it says that they weakened Amalek and his nation by the sword, and this was because Moshe Rabbeinu, being the faithful shepherd of the Yidden, was able to bring out and manifest within each one of the Yidden this power of Moshe, the level that's beyond Tam V'das, the level of Chachma Chaya, and even the level of Yechida, which is necessary to defeat Amalek, which uses the counter logical types of ways to fight the Yidden.